A Scottish gambler convinced the King of France to let him print unlimited money, and it nearly destroyed the nation. In 1716, John Law wasn't a household name. He was a fugitive. 3 years earlier, he'd killed a man in a duel over a woman in London, fled to Amsterdam, and spent years wandering Europe, a mathematician, a schemer, and a man obsessed with one central idea, that paper money could replace gold. Most banks and monarchs thought he was insane. The Duke of Orleans, regent of France, thought he was a genius. France in 1716 was bankrupt. King Louis Roman XIV had died the year before, leaving behind a national debt of roughly 3 billion livres, a sum so vast it was incomprehensible to most people. The government had no credit, foreign investors wouldn't touch French bonds, the regent needed a solution and quickly or the entire financial apparatus of the kingdom would collapse. Law walked into this catastrophe with a proposal. His pitch was elegant in its simplicity. Create a bank that issues paper notes backed by the crown's future tax revenue. Replace the old, corrupt tax farmers with honest administrators. Use the bank to fund colonial expansion in Louisiana, a vast unexplored territory in North America that Law insisted was teeming with gold and silver. The regent, desperate and intrigued, agreed. In May 1716, Law founded the bank Rail. At first it worked. The bank issued notes, real, tangible paper that could be exchanged for gold or silver at any time. Parisians, starved for stable currency, embraced it. Confidence returned. The bank's reputation grew. By 1717, Law's operation was so successful that the regent made him more power. He granted Law control over the Mississippi Company, a trading monopoly that would exploit Louisiana's resources and trade routes. Law saw his opening. The Mississippi Company's charter promised investors extraordinary returns. Some prospectuses claimed 40% annual dividends. Law began selling shares not to wealthy aristocrats alone but to merchants, widows, servants, anyone who could scrape together money. He knew something crucial that they didn't. Those promised returns were fantasy. He was betting on a lie. By 1719, the scheme had entered a new phase. The regent merged the Mississippi Company with Law's bank, creating one unified entity under Law's total control. He renamed it the Company of the Indies. Then he did something extraordinary. He granted the company the right to collect all of France's taxes. A private company now controlled the crown's entire revenue stream. Law had moved from banker to economic dictator in 3 years. The share price exploded. In 1718, a single share cost 500 livres. By September 1719, it had climbed to 2,750 livres. By December of that year, it hit 10,000 livres. Ordinary Parisians were becoming millionaires on paper. People camped outside Law's offices. Servants borrowed their master's jewelry to buy shares. Widows liquidated their life savings. The Rue Quincampoix, where the company traded, became so crowded that pickpockets and con artists worked the throngs. Nobody was thinking about Louisiana anymore. But Law knew what the investors didn't. There was no gold in Louisiana, no silver. The colony was struggling, disease-ridden, and barely producing anything of value. The promised returns were impossible to deliver. The company's profits couldn't justify the share prices. The whole structure rested on one assumption, that prices would keep rising forever. And for a moment, Law almost made it work. In early 1720, cracks appeared. Some early investors began cashing out, converting their paper profits into real gold. This was rational. They'd made fortunes on paper and wanted to secure them. But each conversion required the bank to deliver actual gold it didn't have. Law's solution: print more notes. He flooded the market with currency, hoping the volume of trading would mask the underlying insolvency. It was a desperate gamble. By May 1720, the regent, panicking, made a fatal error. He tried to halt the panic by issuing an edict that limited the amount of gold people could withdraw. If you wanted to sell shares, the government would pay you in paper notes, not metal. Investors interpreted this correctly. The bank was insolvent. The run began in earnest. Thousands converged on the bank demanding their gold. They got nothing. The collapse accelerated. By September 1720, the share price had fallen from 10,000 livres to 2,000. By December, it was 1,000. By the end of 1720, it traded for less than 100. Fortunes vanished. Nobles who'd borrowed to invest were ruined. Servants who'd risked everything lost it. Widows were left with worthless certificates. Estimates suggest that 500,000 French citizens, roughly 5% of the population, suffered direct financial losses. Law himself fled France in December 1720. He traveled to Brussels, then to Venice, living in obscurity on a pension the regent grudgingly granted him. He died in 1729, largely forgotten, his grand vision of paper money and modern finance discredited entirely. The bank Rail and the Mississippi Company were dismantled. France's credit collapsed even further. The nation wouldn't recover financially for decades. What's remarkable about Law's scheme isn't that it failed, it's that it nearly succeeded. He understood something his contemporaries didn't, that modern economies run on confidence, not metal. Paper money works if people believe it's backed by real value. The problem was the belief was manufactured. Law created demand through propaganda and early returns, but he couldn't create the actual wealth Louisiana promised. When the gap between belief and reality became visible, the system collapsed instantly. The Mississippi bubble became the template for every speculative bubble that followed. Tulips in Holland, dot-com stocks, housing in 2008. The pattern is always identical: visionary founder, plausible narrative, early profits, exponential growth, disconnection from underlying value, panic, collapse. Law didn't invent it, he just named it with his ambition. He made the cost visible in numbers that French families couldn't ignore. The deeper lesson is about pressure. Law operated under extraordinary constraints: a bankrupt nation, a desperate regent, a population starving for hope. He solved the immediate crisis brilliantly. He made money move, he restored confidence, but he made a calculation that he could bridge the gap between promise and reality through volume and speed. He was wrong. And when you're wrong at that scale, the cost isn't measured in lost investments. It's measured in ruined lives. John Law believed he could control markets through reason and mathematics. He was brilliant enough to nearly prove it, but markets aren't pure systems, they're human systems. And humans, when faced with unlimited opportunity and no consequences, make the same bet Law made: that this time will be different, that the music will never stop, that the gap between the promise and the reality can be managed indefinitely. It never is, and that's why the Mississippi bubble matters. It's not ancient history, it's a warning written in numbers. Law's ambition cost France's economy a generation of recovery. It cost ordinary people their life savings. It cost him everything. The scheme failed because he underestimated one variable: time. Eventually, reality catches up. The only question is how many people it destroys on the way. Subscribe to explore more financial collapses where ambition met reality, and reality won.